Hello everyone, and welcome back to the ultimate Persona Compendium. In the first part of this Persona 3 analysis, we mainly discuss the story and symbolism. In this part, we're going to be doing much of the same, only this time focusing on the game's expansive cast of characters, specifically the many bonds the hero forms over the course of his journey. They all have their own contained stories that I've only briefly touched on. I'll be going through them individually here, starting with the members of SEES that join your party throughout the game.
I know how tough it is being the new kid, so wanted to say, hey, see what a nice guy I am?
Junpei Iori is a classmate of Yukari and the protagonist. He's an easygoing guy who is cheerful, goofy, and incredibly friendly, almost overbearingly so if Yukari is to be believed. He's among the first students to welcome the hero to the school, but it isn't long until he discovers that he's a Persona user as well, and becomes a member of SEES thereafter. His reasons for joining are somewhat questionable though. For the rest of SEES, being a hero from the shadows is enough, but Junpei wants to be perceived as one by others. He wants to be a cool superhero who is popular with the girls, so he's quick to charge in recklessly to prove himself. Early on, he believes that he should be the one in charge, and develops an inferiority complex towards the hero as a result. He believes that fighting shadows during the dark hour is the only thing he's ever been good at, and sees it as a preferable alternative to having to study for school and think about the future. He laments that, if the dark hour were to go away, he'd be completely worthless. It's when he feels most alive. He admits that he doesn't truly know what he's fighting for. It's only after he meets Chidori that this begins to change. Even after it turns out she was just using him to stop SEES from ending the dark hour, he still rushes to her side in the hospital. He's able to throw aside his selfishness for the sake of someone he cares about. He becomes the cure to her nihilism, and in turn, she becomes his new reason for fighting. Chidori's persona is Medea, a sorceress from Greek mythology who falls in love with the hero Jason, a descendant of the Olympian trickster Hermes, who, as fate would have it, is Junpei's persona. This makes it the only persona among the Strega members that is not a child of Nyx. On the contrary, her persona is able to emit life at the cost of her own. She wishes to die, yet she doesn't want to return to nothing like Takaya and Jin. She wishes to leave a part of herself behind to give strength to those she loves. This is what she does when Junpei is fatally shot by Takaya. She sacrifices her own life to resurrect him, and in doing so, forever leaves a part of herself within him. This is the Spring of Life ability that becomes a part of his ultimate persona, Hermes Trismegistus, the combination of Hermes and the Egyptian god of knowledge, Thoth. He authored the philosophical teachings of the Hermetic texts, such as the famous phrase "as above, so below", which is illustrated on many versions of the Magician Tarot card. Regardless, it's clear that this version of Hermes is also meant to be in the position of the hero Jason from the Argonautica, who set sail on a quest with important figures such as Orpheus and the Dioscuri, which will come up again later. This might be a little too heroic for a character such as Junpei. In fact, this was originally going to be the hero's persona, according to Soejima, but it certainly suits his growth from a wannabe hero at the beginning of the story to a real one.
We should fight.
I agree.
Fuuka Yamagishi is someone who is first heard about rather than met. She's a quiet and reserved honor student, and this made her the target of bullying by some of her peers. She was locked inside of the gym one evening and seemingly vanished into thin air. In actuality, she had become lost in Tartarus, and this is where she would remain for the next 10 days, or rather 10 hours for her, until being rescued by SEES. She had managed to avoid shadows in this time by using the latent powers of her persona, Lucia, which would only fully awaken when she decides to protect the very girl who had locked her in there in the first place, Natsuki. The way Lucia is summoned is rife with symbolism. Instead of appearing on the front lines, it envelops Fuuka and everyone around inside of what can only be described as a womb. This is representative of how it's only able to protect and provide support for others. Saint Lucia was the patron saint of the blind, a Christian martyr during the Great Persecution who provided food and aid to the poor. This not only makes her an appropriate figure to guide us through the darkness of Tartarus, but it also informs us a lot about Fuuka herself. She has the kindness and compassion of a saint, which is how she's able to forgive Natsuki and accept her as a friend. But before, she was passive. She was just trying to please the people around her, whether it be her parents or school bullies, and her heart was closed off. Her awakening is Fuuka finally asserting her will to live, and it comes in the form of a desire to connect with others and help them. This is why much of her social link is based around her trying to become a better cook. This could be seen as the true power of her persona, to connect to others even when far away, and because of this, she no longer fears drifting apart from her friends. She's found a sense of comfort with her bonds. It's this realization that awakens her ultimate persona, Juno, the Roman goddess of marriage. Marriage would be the most developed and mature bond one could form. I'm sure with everything we discussed in the first part, I don't need to explain the significance of the mother's womb. In short, both personas embody the positive traits of the Great Mother, which is the archetype featured on the Priestess card.
You see, I had overestimated my ability to handle everything alone. Few people can be that strong. There are times when we cannot stand without the support of others.
Mitsuru Kirijo is the fearless commander of Seas who fights to atone for her family's sins. It's a responsibility that's weighed on her since she was a child and has forced her to mature quicker than most, shaping her into the intelligent and level-headed leader she is today. Whatever the situation, she's always the one in control. This aspect of her personality is reflected in the slight dominatrix motifs in both her design and the design of her personas. She never allows herself to be emotionally vulnerable, instead preferring to be objective and detached from the people around her. Even when it comes to herself, she must maintain control at all times. This is one of her greatest assets, but it's also her biggest weakness, and doesn't follow the Kirijo family creed. 2 in harmony surpasses 1 in perfection. By closing herself off, she's unwittingly created a number of blind spots in her personality, the biggest of which is one I mentioned earlier, her reason for fighting in the first place. She doesn't fight for some lofty goal like atoning for her family's evil. She fights simply to make her father happy. It only makes sense then that when he dies, she will be left with nothing.
Our days of fighting together are over. We have no common goal to fight for, no enemies to defeat, no reason to be friends.
Her will to fight is completely shattered. That is, until she realizes that she's not alone. Yukari feels the same pain. Finally, she's able to open up to another person, and awakens to her ultimate persona, Artemisia. Both of her personas are strong female warriors that were also monarchs, befitting the Empress arcana. This is the role Mitsuru plays in Seas. She's able to provide support like Fuuka, but she's also able to join the fray. She primarily uses ice magic, which could reflect how she's a little cold and unapproachable. In fact, she won't even hang out with the protagonist until he's of genius-level intellect. However, her social link reveals a more naive and vulnerable side due to her sheltered upbringing. She's torn between an arranged marriage for the sake of the Kirijo group and pursuing her own happiness. She even considers running away from everything entirely, but ultimately finds strength to do both thanks to her budding romance with the protagonist. Once again, Mitsuru finds strength through her bonds with other people. With this, she's able to face the future with renewed purpose and determination.
I know what it's like to feel powerless. and I don't want to feel that way again.
Akihiko Sanada is the cool, reliable senior of the group. The emperor to Mitsuru's empress. Or at least that's what he would like you to believe. The truth is, he can be quite socially awkward and is prone to overcompensating. He's not above participating in the other guys' silly hijinks. He has a strong determination to be the best, whether it be in combat or more trivial matters, such as picking up women at the beach. This drive stems from a very serious place though. He grew up in an orphanage with his little sister, Miki, who tragically perished in a fire when he was 9 years old. Even though there's nothing he could have done to prevent this, he still holds himself to blame. If only he was stronger. If only he wasn't powerless. He could have saved her. In his mind, eliminating his weakness was the only way to atone, so he swore to become strong enough to protect the people close to him. This led to the awakening of his persona, Polydeuces, a demigod warrior from Greek mythology who was a master in hand-to-hand combat, reflecting how Akihiko's fighting style of choice is boxing. Another important bit of symbolism in this persona is how the head is much smaller than the overdeveloped body. According to Soejima, this reflects the immaturity of Akihiko's worldview. It ensures that his sister's death will forever fester inside of him, coming to the surface during every moment of weakness. It's a strong motivator perhaps, but it's undoubtedly caused him a great deal of anguish. This is a serious character flaw that he shares with his childhood friend, who we must discuss before continuing.
This is how it should be.
Shinjiro Aragaki is first introduced as a mysterious acquaintance of Akihiko. He later shows up in a rough part of town and saves our heroes from a scary encounter with a gang. His thuggish appearance and icy cold glare seem to fit the surroundings, but his actions tell a different story. He's actually a former member of SEAS who grew up in the same orphanage as Akihiko. He was also deeply affected by the death of Miki and swore to become stronger for the sake of his friend. He awakened to his persona, Castor, the mortal twin brother of Polydeuces. Together, they were known as Dioscuri, and they fought side by side in the Greek epics, such as the aforementioned Argonautica. From this alone, we can gather that these two persona users were extremely close allies in battle. However, a terrible accident would soon drive them apart. While hunting for shadows, Shinjiro's persona went berserk and killed an innocent bystander, the mother of Amada. He was fighting to protect people, and now he was directly responsible for someone's death. Guilt-ridden, he left SEAS and sought atonement in his own way. He started using persona-suppressing drugs in an attempt to escape his past and get rid of his persona entirely. This aspect of the story is a little hazy since his persona never goes berserk again, and neither does any other naturally awakened persona. It could mean that he lost control in battle and this allowed his persona to run rampant. In any case, he no longer saw his persona as a means of helping people. It could only cause death and destruction. And perhaps, by extension, he came to the conclusion that that was all he was capable of as well. Although he refused to admit it, the drugs would eventually kill him. He was subconsciously seeking the grave, driven by the death drive. And he was okay with that. It was his way of atonement after all. Or at least it would have been, if Amada didn't join SEAS as a persona user. This revelation prompts him to return to SEAS himself, knowing full well what would await him if he did. The Dark Hour represents death. For those who wield a persona, it's inescapable. They must face it every evening at the stroke of midnight. For Shinjiro, this reminder of death, this reminder of his own mortality, took on a different meaning. It no longer represented the future, his own eventual death, but the past. Just as he cannot escape the future, he cannot change the past. And this is why Shinjiro shirked his duties as a persona user and tried to run away. It's only appropriate then that his death would come when the past, Ken Amada, and the future, the Dark Hour, would converge.
It's my fault. This is what I deserve. But let me give you one warning.
Warning?
If you decide to take my life, you'll end up like me. Just remember that.
Akihiko's obsession with becoming strong stemmed from his desire to protect the ones he loved. And yet, he was utterly powerless to save Shinjiro, who was ultimately killed by something that could not be beaten with strength alone. Both Akihiko and Shinjiro are alike in many ways, like their mythological counterparts, the Dioscuri. They were both running away from a past that would inevitably catch up to them. Only now, with Shinjiro's death, does Akihiko realize the folly of this mindset.
I was so focused on fighting that I didn't notice anything else. It didn't matter how tough I was. Look what happened!
Finally, he awakens to his ultimate persona, Caesar. This figure is more of a manifestation of the imperial title itself rather than the famous Roman dictator from which it derived. It's meant to reflect Akihiko's growth and maturity now that he's able to stop running from the past and forgive himself. He's now able to control his own fate like a true emperor.
Living means looking death square in the face. So I won't back down. Not even from you!
Yukari Takeba is the very first Persona user encountered in the game. She's strong-willed and independent, but also short-tempered. While she's not overly serious, she's not one to play around either, and is often unamused by the silly hijinks of the guys. At first, she comes across as a normal high school girl thrust into a very unusual double life as a member of SEAS, but this isn't entirely the case. She's actually on a mission to find the truth about her father, who was killed in the Kirijo lab explosion 10 years ago. This is her reason for fighting, and why she chooses to face death as a Persona user despite her fear. This resolve is briefly shaken after the Yakushima Island trip.
I know the whole story about my father now. But I was thinking maybe I could erase the mistakes he left behind.
Yet again, Yukari's motivation is tied to her father. She mentions how people blamed both her and her mother for the lab explosion, so it's possible that she still feels in some way responsible for the aftermath it caused. By choosing to love him unconditionally, she must also bear the guilt of his actions. This is both Yukari's strength and what keeps her bound to the past, unable to move forward. The burden of loving her father is perhaps why she has trouble coming to love anyone else, in addition to the tumultuous relationship she has with her mother, who she believes became a bad parent after the incident. She was quick to throw herself into the arms of any man that came along promising emotional support. This is the reason why Yukari herself is weary of relationships and becoming too dependent on anyone. This is something that she's able to make peace with as she develops feelings for the hero, hence her arcana, the lovers. Her initial persona is Io, a water nymph from Greek mythology who had an affair with the god Zeus. When his wife Hera found out about his duplicity, he turned her into a cow to hide her, a farm that she would be stuck in for a very long time as she travelled the world. The persona depicts Io as being shackled to the cow, symbolising how Yukari views love and dependency as things that rob her of freedom. When she later discovers the truth about her father, about how he wanted to stop Kirijo's experiments, her resolve is renewed. She no longer has to view her love as chains holding her back, and is now free to do what she believes in. This allows her to awaken to her ultimate persona, Isis, an Egyptian goddess that has many parallels to the tale of Io. Both take the form of cows and have ties to the moon, a symbol which we've already established as being intrinsic of the mother archetype. These figures could be said to be one and the same, just at different stages in life. Yukari's persona, becoming an archetypal mother goddess, represents how she's now matured and is ready to love again.
They said he died by some violent crime, right? No one knows the truth. just like with Mom.
At first, Ken Amada seems like a respectful and unassuming young boy who only wants to do what he can to help. But this serves to hide his dark, ulterior motive. His true goal is to have his revenge on the Persona user that killed his mother. This intense desire for revenge has consumed him so completely that he has nothing else to live for. Hatred is the only thing that continues to drive him. It is perhaps for this reason that he awakened to his persona, Nemesis, the Greek goddess of divine retribution. It can also be seen as the personification of vengeance itself. It heeded his yearning to strike down those who wronged him, and is appropriately of the Justice Arcana. Nemesis is a child of Nyx, which indicates that Ken is on a destructive path to the grave, much like the members of Strega. Its mechanical design emphasizes Ken's detachment from human emotions and morality. He sees himself as a machine that functions solely to fulfill this mission. It's only when he's moments away from actually achieving this that he starts to question things. In this moment, Shinjiro represents the inevitable end of his journey, a lonely path leading to death, and Takaya represents the darker impulses that are guiding him on this path, the shadow. He reveals that Shinjiro was going to die anyway, so his mission was always pointless.
It doesn't matter anymore. I'll never have my revenge. I have no reason to live.
I see. So you have achieved resolution.
In a way, he already had his revenge. He resigns himself to death before being saved by the very target of his revenge, Shinjiro. This too has thrown Ken's world completely upside down. The person he had directed all of his hate towards had died trying to save him, and it brought him no happiness. But this time, he wasn't empty inside. He still had the final words of Shinjiro urging him to live on and find happiness, something that had been taken from both of them when his mother died that day. Shinjiro might have been consumed by his darker impulses, which again is represented by Takaya, but Ken still has a chance. With this, he's able to forgive him and leave the past behind. He now awakens to his ultimate persona, representing his new outlook and determination to live on and defy fate. Kalanemi, the pre-Vedic spirit of the stars, the great wheel of time. This symbolizes the point where the past and the future converge. For Ken, it signifies wholeness and a connection to a future that was once out of his reach. Koromaru is a rather unusual party member. Clearly, he's a dog, a Shiba Inu to be exact. So, doing a character analysis might be a little difficult, but I'll do my best. His story is most likely inspired by true accounts of loyal dogs that never forgot their masters to the very end. Greyfriars Bobby, or Japan's own Hachiko, comes to mind. Poor Koromaru was heartbroken after his master, a monk at Naganaki Shrine, was killed by shadows. He now dutifully guards his resting place. Like the multi-headed hound Cerberus at the gates of Hades that would become his other self. Since he's a dog and can't actually speak, except when occasionally translated by Aigis, how much he truly comprehends the situation is up to interpretation. One thing is certain though, he knows that shadows are his sworn enemies. After he's wounded in battle, he's found by Seas and is brought into their ranks. His story is actually very similar to a lot of the other characters when you get right down to it. He eventually comes to realise that he isn't alone, and that he has precious bonds with other people that are worth protecting. He could be seen as the travelling companion of the Fool as depicted on the eponymous tarot card. Next we have the social links, or S-links for short. These are optional stories that can be established mostly during the daytime, and use up the main character's free time. Some of them require extra steps to unlock, such as having certain social stats high enough or already being equated with another character. There are also other S-links that rank up automatically as you progress through the story. These include the Fool, Death, and Judgment Arcana. We won't be talking about those here. With a couple exceptions, which we'll get to, the individual stories here do not have any larger meaning within the main narrative. They only loosely connect to their respective arcana. According to series director Katsura Hashino, they simply serve to represent a different step on the hero's journey through the major arcana, and reflect his personal choices and philosophy. These basically have the hero acting as a sort of therapist, listening to people's troubles and occasionally giving them some input. Often the best answers aren't the ones that are genuinely good advice though, rather it's the ones that gently push them to realizing the truth on their own that are ideal, much like the choices in Persona 2. It varies though, depending on the personality. Some characters like flattery, others prefer brutal honesty. In any case, the preferred choices grant the most points, which are needed to rank up the social link the next time you hang out with them. This mechanic is hidden from the player for the most part. In fact, the exact number of points is only revealed in the strategy guides, but you can tell which responses have the best effect by the musical notes over the characters' heads. More points are granted if the player has a persona of the same arcana as the S-Link. Essentially, it's all about putting on the best persona for the person or scenario. It's the same Jungian ideas used in the battle system, only in their normal, real-world context. The social links with the female characters will also lead to romance, which adds a dating sim aspect as well as an extra layer of complexity to keep in mind. These S-links will become reversed if the hero goes too long without seeing them, regardless of whether or not they're currently in a romantic relationship. Again, the exact numbers are not revealed in the game itself, but you can figure them out. Before dating, the time limit is 60 days. Once dating, it's reduced to 45. The rank at which they become romantic varies depending on the character. This is important to keep in mind because once a romance has started, they'll become jealous if you hang out with other girls. This will reduce that time limit I mentioned significantly, but it can be reset simply by hanging out with them after school or during the weekend. You don't have to worry about it at all once they're maxed. Some of the male S-links can become reversed too, but they don't have such stringent time limits. You can end up reversing one of these by double booking on a Sunday hangout. There are even some dialogue choices that can instantly lead to a reversal. If an S-link does become reversed, they can no longer be found in their usual spot. They'll be upset with the hero and will decline any invites to hang out. They'll reconsider after you pester them enough times though, which will give you an opportunity to mend the relationship. If it's a romance S-link, they'll give the hero a very stern and heartfelt talking to about their future together, a regrettable scenario for any man. Depending on your response, the relationship can be restored or made much worse. This is known as a broken S-link, and it's unique to the girls. It sounds pretty bad, but a broken S-link is functionally identical to a reversed one, and can be mended in much the same way, with a little extra effort on the player's part. The S-link cannot rank up again until this process is over, and it'll take up time during the day, so it's an unfortunate fumble to make. Interestingly, players who wish to complete all of the social links, which is possible with careful planning, may find cheating unavoidable. All of the female social links of the same age as the hero lead to romance. Platonic relationships are simply non-existent.
Men and women can't be friends because the sex part always gets in the way.
Why it was designed this way is up to interpretation, I suppose. But Hashino jokes that it may have been because they never forged a platonic relationship with a girl in real life. You can avoid cheating simply by maxing out only one of the girls in a single playthrough. Most players were never expected to get all of them anyway. Hashino even states that he wouldn't have minded if it was impossible. It's meant to be a unique experience for every player. They gravitate towards who they like and avoid who they don't. Don't stress out too much about doing absolutely everything in the game. It's about as necessary as grinding to level 99 for the final boss. Anyway, it's time we analyse the social links one by one. The Magician's social link is represented by Kenji Tomochika, the friendly and approachable classmate of the hero. He invites him out for ramen at the start of the school semester, which aptly makes him the first figure encountered by the Fool, same as his shadow counterpart. They hang out and share some idle chatter about girls. That is, until Kenji confides that he wants to ask out one of the teachers and make her his girlfriend, a quest he absolutely will not be swayed from. Kenji is determined and has initiative, just like the Fool when he sets off on his journey, but his goals are misplaced and immature, befitting the Magician. He initially considers himself an expert on women, but comes to realise that he has much to learn. I think everyone has probably known a Kenji at some point in their lives, if they're not a Kenji themselves. The Emperor's social link is represented by Hidetoshi Odagiri, a member of the disciplinary committee in the student council, which the hero can join on Mitsuru's recommendation. He will stop at nothing to find whoever has been leaving cigarette butts in the boys' bathroom, and soon comes to consider the hero his most trusted ally in this pursuit. He is, in short, a stickler for the rules. So much so that he becomes a menace to the students and the student council alike. This stems from his desire to gain leadership and a position of power, as he believes that people cannot get by on sincerity alone. However, he betrays this line of thinking when one of the teachers accuses the hero of wrongdoing. He ultimately chooses his friend over his position of power, and realises that he cannot tread over others to make his way to the top. This is the true meaning of the Emperor Arcana. Leadership that is based on trust as opposed to tyranny. In the end, he finds his culprit. Not with the threat of punishment, but with the understanding of a compassionate ruler. The Hierophant Arcana is represented by Bunkichi and Mitsuko, the kindly old couple that runs the used bookstore at the strip mall. To start it, the hero must bring them a leaf from the persimmon tree in the school's walkway. They recognise it as being from the tree that was planted by their deceased son, who was a teacher at the school. It's currently in danger of being cut down, and they fear that the memory of their son will vanish along with it. Other students even come together to save it, but in the end, the couple decides to let it happen so a new addition to the school can be built. They put aside their own happiness for the future of the children, which is why they represent the Hierophant Arcana. This is normally associated with a religious figure, like its shadow equivalent, but here it's more about someone acting as a guiding hand for the next generation. The Chariot social link is represented by Kazushi Miyamoto, a hard-working sports enthusiast with big dreams, and a member of whatever athletic team the hero joins. His goal is to win at the regional meet later in the year, but his chances become slim after a serious knee injury. He continues to train anyway, even when warned that it will only worsen his injury. He attempts to hide this from everyone but the hero, who he sees as both a friend and rival. The reason behind his irrational behaviour comes from a promise he made with his nephew, who also sustained a pretty serious leg injury. He'll go through rehab if Kazushi is able to become #1 in Japan. He has serious competition for that, I hear. When he's eventually found out, he realises that he was being irresponsible and immature. There's no sense in pushing himself so hard if it means becoming a burden on his family and friends. The Chariot represents victory for the individual, but Kazushi's victory isn't won by foolishly going it alone. It's won by realising that he's not alone and that it's okay to rely on others, which is something of a recurring theme in this game if you haven't noticed. The Conqueror on the Chariot cannot move forward without control of the opposing forces of the Sphinxes, just as Kazushi cannot move forward without acknowledging his limitations. The Justice Social Link is represented by Chihiro Fushimi, the shy and self-conscious student council treasurer. She can be befriended after the hero joins the student council himself, but even then she has trouble opening up to him because of her fear of men. She isn't very confident in herself. Even her role as treasurer was given to her against her will. It's only after coming to rely on the main character that she's able to assert herself more, and this is put to the test when she's accused of stealing money from the students. Everyone is convinced it was her, and the only person she can turn to is, once again, the main character. She begrudgingly admits that she isn't strong enough to stand up for herself, and yet again has to rely on others. That is, until she becomes extremely jealous over the prospect of the hero being alone with Mitsuru, and quickly dashes to resolve the situation. In the end, it turns out to be a simple misunderstanding with a forgetful teacher. Chihiro is in a position of responsibility and is accused unfairly. She's driven to do what she thinks is right. The possessive motivations behind her actions are irrelevant. The important part is that she finally became a person who is able to stand up for what she believes is fair and just, which is what the Justice Arcana stands for. The Hermit social link begins when the hero plays the online game given to him by Junpei. In the Japanese version, this game is called Devil Busters Online and references Megami Tensei 2 as well as Digital Devil Story. In the English version though, it was changed to Innocent Sin Online, a reference to Persona 2, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering they're meant to take place in the same universe. At any rate, the hero becomes friends with a player who goes by the screen name Maya, Maiko in Japanese. As the two continue to play together, she reveals bits and pieces about her real life, about how she's frustrated with her job as a teacher, and how guys aren't interested in her anymore. She goes on drunken tirades about her co-workers, and even reveals that she has a crush on one of her students. The aloof one with no parents who just transferred in. Yes, really. The Hermit tarot card is often illustrated with a figure standing on a mountain peak, absorbed in introspection. They gain self-knowledge by isolating themselves from the rest of civilization. A modern equivalent of this could be someone locked in a room playing video games. Maya retreats from reality into the escapism of an MMO, where she's free to vent her frustrations to a complete stranger online. She's figuring things out bit by bit, and by the end she's ready to emerge back into civilization with a new perspective. The end of the game reveals Maya's true identity, and what ensues is a very funny scene. The Fortune social link is represented by Keisuke Hiraga, the leader of the art, music, or photography clubs, depending on which one the hero joins. He's the son of a hospital director, so he's constantly checking on everyone's well-being. He's caught between his passion for art and his father's expectations for him to follow in his footsteps. After he's able to prove himself though, his father recognizes his talents and leaves a choice up to him. Will he choose art, or will he become a doctor? It's something he goes back and forth on. Keisuke is well and truly at the crossroads of fate, the wheel of fortune. He has countless opportunities before him, and yet the one he decides on will alter his fate. This is the dilemma at the root of this social link. What he truly desires is to be the one in control of his own fate, not influenced by his father. In the end, he finds the answer for his desire to help those in need. He decides to become a doctor, but this time it's of his own volition. Strength is represented by Yuko Nishiwaki, the team manager of the athletic club. Her social link is activated during Kazushi's if you decide to walk home with her. Her story begins, perhaps intentionally, as quite aimless. She rants about her teachers, has low self-esteem, and is having some trouble with a girl picking on her. It's only when she runs into the 4th graders from her street that things start coming into place. She becomes their running coach to help them win a race against the older kids. This experience inspires her to do more coaching in future. Strength is about using love to tame ferocious passions. In Yuko's case, the children she trains could be symbolic of the lion on the strength card, and her own untapped passions in general. By concentrating the children's enthusiasm into something productive, she finds control and a sense of guidance within herself, which she then uses to decide her future. The Hanged Man S-Link is represented by a little girl by the shrine named Maiko Ohashi, who will play with the hero if he brings her a can of Mad Bull and some takoyaki. Her cheerful exterior hides a great deal of sadness over her parents' divorce, something she's still struggling to make sense of at her age. She thinks they're separating because they hate her, so she comes up with a plan to run away from home. In a way, she's putting herself in the position of the Hanged Man, a self-sacrifice to reveal hidden truths about the world. During Edogawa's class lecture, he says that this card reflects an individual's inability to take action. In Maiko's case, she's too young and immature to do anything to help her situation, but she does end up gaining a new perspective from the experience. She learns that she was wrong about the reasons for her parents' divorce, and that they do love her after all. The Temperance social link is represented by Bebe, a French foreign exchange student who is first encountered at the bookstore. He can subsequently be found sewing in the home economics room as part of the fashion club, which the hero can join to make friends with him. He loves Japanese culture and wishes to spend his life there, but after the death of his aunt, his uncle demands that he return home. With the help of the hero, he hopes to convince him to change his mind. Together, they work on a kimono that shows how much he loves his newfound homeland and how much he wants to stay. It ends up working. But in the end, he decides to stay in France for the sake of his family. This act of self-restraint, also known as the virtue of temperance, is another step towards maturity and self-actualization. Bebe has seen the larger world and is now comfortable with his place in it. The Devil's social link is represented by President Tanaka, the host of Tanaka's Amazing Commodities that plays on TV every Sunday. He can be found in person loitering around Polonia Mall at night time, promising to make the hero rich if he's willing to invest a small sum. If the hero is gullible enough to keep doing this, he'll eventually reveal that it was all a scam, and take him under his wing as an apprentice. No refunds though. Tanaka is a very interesting figure. There's nothing he doesn't see as an opportunity to make money, morals be damned. He didn't pull himself out of poverty by being an honest man. And not only is he aware of this fact, but he sees it as the key to his success. The main reason he took an interest in the hero is because he felt his young, handsome appearance could help hide the ugly side of his shady business. He does end up donating to charity in the end, but even this has a self-serving, ulterior motive. He wants people to be indebted to him so they'll take care of him in his old age. He thanks the hero for helping him come to this realization, even though he didn't do much of anything. The Devil Arcana is about temptation and materialism. Tanaka finds himself hoarding wealth but has nothing in life to spend it on. His story arc is deliberately comical. Instead of addressing the root cause of his greed, he just fixes one of the symptoms and continues being the same cutthroat businessman he always was. The Tower social link is represented by Mutatsu. the old monk who is first heard about from Yuko, and can be found drinking alone at the nightclub. He's initially very confused why a high school boy keeps talking to him. He is, after all, a grumpy old drunk whose wife and kid left him, but he soon becomes quite comfortable with his presence and begins rambling about his life and imparting questionable wisdom along the way. While he appears aloof, he's actually a kind man, and glimmers of that caring father and husband come to the surface every now and then. The tower is the lowest point of the fool's journey, ironically, when he believes all is lost. Likewise, Mutatsu is at the lowest point in his life. He's an old man without family or friends, drinking to fill the void. He can be seen as the ultimate cautionary tale to the hero, to make the most of his time and form strong bonds while he still can. All is not lost for Mutatsu though. Through his interactions with the hero, who strongly reminds him of his son, he realizes that he's been running away from his problems. In the end, he's able to reunite with his wife and son again and end his isolation. As I said in the previous part, the Sun Hero must descend to the darkest depths before he can rise again in full splendor. Which brings us to the next arcana. The star social link is represented by Mamoru Hayase, the rival athlete who ends up beating the hero at the regionals of whatever sport he decides to join. He's impressed with his performance and asks to hang out sometime. From here, he can be found near the takoyaki stand at the strip mall. There isn't much ego to Mamoru. He's competitive, but holds no ill will. He's more concerned about using his talent to provide a comfortable life for his family. His father died 5 years ago, leaving only his mother to take care of him and his siblings. He's quick to blame his troubles on his father's death, but soon comes to realize that he must be the one to step up and take responsibility. The star represents a shining light in the darkness, a new beginning after hardships. But the fool's struggles are not over yet, which brings us to this next social link. The moon social link is represented by Nozomi Suimitsu, also known as the Gourmet King, first heard about from Kenji. He can be found at Polonia Mall during the day, but will refuse to talk to the hero unless he's charming enough to distract him from his sandwich. Even then, he won't trust him unless he can prove that he's a fellow gourmet by passing his quiz and feeding him an unusual food. An odd morsel. Needless to say, Nozomi is quite the glutton. His appetite is matched only by his general unpleasantness. He had a younger brother who he found himself unfavourably compared to quite often. It was because of this that he felt relieved when he suddenly died one day. But the comparisons didn't cease, and Nozomi found himself forever living in his brother's shadow. He sought to escape from everything, which is how he became a recruiter for a doomsday cult. His story, at least in small part, ties in thematically with the main story. Let's not forget the significance of the moon and its association with illusions. The latter half of the game has many people in the city buying into the idea that death is the path to salvation. This is the illusion cast on people by Nyx, whose all-encompassing influence is symbolized by the moon. Nozomi is eventually able to see through the illusion when he stops running from himself. It's doubtful this will solve his many character flaws, but his future is definitely a brighter one. Which brings us to the sun. The Sun social link is represented by Akinari Kamiki, a sickly young man who is first encountered during Maiko's social link. He's available to speak to at the shrine every Sunday after you find his lost fountain pen. Unfortunately, there's no cure for his condition, leaving him with no other option but to lament what little time he has left in the world. He's an avid reader and is clearly intelligent, and this comes through in how he is able to eloquently articulate his despair and sorrow to the hero. After a while, he comes up with the idea to channel this into writing a story about a pink alligator. He hopes that by writing an upbeat story to cheer himself up, he can find meaning in his life. But try as he might, the story only ever ends with an incomplete, sad conclusion. It's always a reflection of his sadness and uncertainty about his own meaning in life. He finds a sense of peace just before the end, comforted by the fact that everyone has to face death sooner or later, and he's just going a little sooner. In their final meeting, Akinari reveals that he finished the story, and in turn found the answer that he was looking for. The sentiment expressed is that, although he may die, what he leaves behind will be remembered by those around him. He may not find meaning in his own life, but other people will. In essence, it's his bonds with other people. He has achieved the happiness that comes with living a worthwhile and meaningful life, and he can now pass on without regrets. This is the true meaning of the Sun Arcana. Even if Akinari had a short life filled with sadness, he was still able to shine as a symbol for future generations. His legacy will be passed down by the people he touched, and by his story about a pink alligator. This is the same tranquility the hero is able to achieve at the end of his own journey. Which leads us to the final character in this analysis we're going to be taking a look at.
The sole purpose of my existence is to destroy shadows. For that reason, I was given a personality and a persona.
Aigis is a rather unusual character for the setting, but her importance to Persona 3's story cannot be understated. As an anti-shadow weapon, she was created in the image of a human girl so that she could develop a personality and summon a persona. This was made possible by her Papillion heart, which contains a plume of dusk, a fragment of Nyx that was broken off when it collided with the moon. This makes a lot of sense considering, as we saw in part 1, Nyx is the origin of individuality and the collective unconscious. Even so, when the cast initially meets Aigis at Yakushima Island, she far from passes as human. The way she acts is stiff and, well, robotic. She's a fish out of water in the real world, which leads to a lot of comical interactions with the characters. She doesn't quite grasp human thoughts and emotions, and this stops her from forming a meaningful bond with the hero. At this point, she's more of a facsimile of a human, something that's reflected by her persona, Palladion. Palladion was a wooden statue of the goddess Athena that was believed to protect the city of Troy, much like how Aigis is a replica of a human that protects the hero. But this desire to keep him safe from harm would be the catalyst of Aigis' more human tendencies. Originally, it was only the remnants of her past mission to destroy death, and likely some unconscious guilt stemming from that kept her interested in the hero. But this starts to pivot towards genuine love and affection as she begins to question things more. This leads to her gaining enough autonomy to defy her programming when Akutsuki orders her to kill him.
You are very special to me. I do not know why, but I always want to be by your side. I want to protect you.
Even though Aigis understands that she has these feelings, she still considers herself an expendable machine, for the simple fact that she cannot die like the others.
Even if I was completely destroyed, the programming data necessary to recreate me would still exist.
To Aigis, only those that can die truly possess life. Her reasoning could be considered sound, but she speaks as if she's trying to convince herself more than anything else. Are these the actions of a logical machine, or someone struggling with self-worth? The line between the two has become indistinguishable. Since Aigis views herself in this light, she can only derive her self-worth from her function. That is to say, as a machine designed to destroy shadows. But even this is taken from her when she's faced with an undefeatable enemy. Nyx.
Why fight when you know that you can't win? What is the purpose of that? Why are you wasting your lives?
She can't comprehend why the other members of SEAS are determined to confront such a foe when they're faced with certain death.
So then, what is my purpose now? Could someone please tell me?
Aigis must derive her purpose from something more intangible than mere function. She has to leave behind the precise logic of a machine and use intuition to guide her way. She must put herself at the mercy of the same paradoxical mystery that all humans seek the answer to. She must live to find why she lives. She must live to find the meaning of life. For the first time, she finds herself on the same page as everyone else. She's no longer an inauthentic copy. She's achieved what can only be described as humanity, allowing her persona, Palladian, to evolve into its true form, the real incarnation of the goddess Athena. Aigis' name actually comes from Aegis, the shield wielded by Athena. This symbolizes the purpose that Aigis has found for herself in life. She wishes to be beside the hero and protect him from harm. With these new developments, she's now able to form bonds with other people, which is how the player is able to gain the Aeon social link in the FES version of the game. Like Aigis herself, the Aeon card is a bit of an outlier. It doesn't originate from the Rider deck like the others. Rather, it's the Thoth deck equivalent of the Judgment Tarot card. It tells of great change and the potential for new possibilities and insights. This social link is something of a microcosm of the entire game's themes, and mainly follows Aigis as she explores her new outlook on life. She has doubts and frustrations. She struggles with negative emotions such as jealousy. She tries to learn what it means to live from people who have never really given it much thought. This social link makes it pretty clear why a machine was chosen to convey these themes in the first place. Aigis' purpose is to fight shadows, the physical representation of death, and yet death is not in her nature. Being a machine, she cannot die in the traditional sense. There's no memento mori waiting for her. It's a foreign concept that she does not understand in the abstract sense. This might be the significance of her not using an evoker in battle like the others. Remember what I said in the first part of this analysis. We must behold death, for it teaches us how to live. By that logic, it would seem that Aigis is unable to learn what it means to live, but this definitely isn't the case as we've already seen. Instead, she learns the meaning of life and death through her interactions with other people, similar to the Fool. This ties back to the game's reoccurring theme of leaving your mark on the world and being remembered by those you leave behind. All of the cast in some way finds strength and meaning through their connection to each other. Ultimately, we're all connected through the collective unconscious. It's the collective effort of humanity to understand the meaning of ourselves, and pass it on to the next generation through symbols. This idea is taken for granted by the living, but through Aigis it's all laid bare, and it hits its crescendo in the game's epilogue. After the final battle against Nyx, everyone's memories of the Dark Hour are erased. But because of the strength of their bonds, they're able to recall their promise to reunite on the last day of school. This connection through the collective unconscious trumps the inherent laws of the universe, just as it did when they were able to defeat Nyx. Aigis at last seems to know her reason for living. She wishes to remain by the hero's side until the very end. She understands that it will all end one day, and she will experience great pain and sorrow. But she's made peace with that, because that's what it means to be alive. She's at last become human, not in a literal sense, but symbolically through her connection to others. Fittingly, the final movie shows her without any robotic parts.
Don't worry.
I will always be by your side, protecting you.